Hello all, my name is Jeff Puckett and this is my video presentation of my older adult interview. The person I chose to interview is one of my close work friends within my organization. I work as a senior services case manager at our local senior center. I chose to interview one of my colleagues by the name of Vicky. Vicky happens to be the office manager, and so we work very closely on a daily basis. With my being new to the area and community, Vicky is very much my first resource for information pertaining to our area, available service referrals, community support, etc. Vicky is 74 years old, happily married for 50 years, with two grown sons and four amazing grandchildren. Vicky was the oldest child with one other sister. She was raised in San Francisco, California with a very close-knit family which consisted of herself, her sister, mother, father, and grandmother, uncles, aunts, and several cousins. Her first career position was as a school teacher, which she did for more than 20 years. Then she transitioned into working for the company we work for now. Erik Erikson's psychosocial development theory. Erikson believes that all individuals pass through 8 specific stages of life, encountering crisis and resolution in some fashion. This process is broken down into age brackets that are significant to life criteria and functionality. Erikson believes that each stage introduces new challenges that are integral to proper psychosocial development. These 8 stages consist of Stage 1, trust versus mistrust. Stage 2, autonomy versus shame and doubt. Stage 3, initiative versus guilt. Stage 4, industry versus inferiority. Stage 5, identity versus identity confusion. Stage 6, intimacy versus isolation. Stage 7, generative versus stagnation. Stage 8, integrity versus despair. After conducting my interview with Vicky, we were able to ascertain that one of her most memorable life events that changed her life forever occurred when she was between the ages of 13 and 18. This means that according to Erik Erikson and his psychosocial development theory, she would have been in the 5th stage, which is where the individual intersects with identity and role confusion. This stage is also known as the toddler stage of adulthood. This is when the individual is cresting out of childhood logic and thinking and beginning to develop more keen adult-like understandings and thinking processes. This means they begin to act and react in more independent ways while grasping onto societal and community roles to help develop and shape their personal identity. Individuals in this age bracket tend to typically struggle with crises pertaining to body development and hormone influx that throws things like emotions and proper impulsivity responses out the window. Individuals in this stage begin to test the limits and boundaries set upon them by parents, teachers, community, and so on. This is when identity begins to flourish in a very egocentric manner until the individual is able to connect with some sort of social group that helps regulate their identity metamorphosis. According to Sal McLeod, who is a researcher for the University of Manchester in the Division of Neuroscience and Experimental Psychology, McLeod says, during this period, they explore possibilities and begin to form their own identity based upon the outcome of their explorations. Failure to establish a sense of identity within society can lead to role confusion. Role confusion involves the individual not being sure about themselves or their place in society. Stage 5 experiences. I noticed experiences that Vicky endured during this stage of Erikson's developmental theory were devastating to say the very least. At the age of 13, Vicky's mother began her battle with cancer. By 14, her mother had lost the fight and passed away. As if this alone wasn't enough to completely shatter somebody's state of normalcy beyond repair, more was in store for Vicky. Within just a couple months after losing her mother, her father had met someone new. In less than 6 months after the death of her mother, her father had decided to remarry this new woman. Sadly, after the new marriage, everything again took a turn for the worst. The new stepmother, with 3 kids already of her own, now embarking on her 4th marriage, decided to ship all of the children off to separate boarding schools across the country. Vicky was now almost 15 and in the midst of her identity development stage that she had lost her mother, now lost her father to a new wife and new life, but also lost all ties and connections with her one and only sister. The new stepmom made sure that no extended family of any kind, especially grandma from mother's side, was to have any communication with the children. Stepmom had contacted the schools and put blocks on any outside communications by telling horrific lies to staff and administration. By 15, stepmom had cleared the home of all children and had now sold every last piece of family furniture, heirlooms, memories, etc. She had completely dissolved all memory and trace of Vicky's birth mother and moved with father to the Reno, Nevada area, where the stepmother was originally from. Challenges and accomplishments. According to the professionals at psychologynoteshq.com, whenever we experience such crisis, we are left with no choice but to face it and think of ways to resolve it. Failure to overcome such crisis may lead to significant impact on our psychosocial development. As imagined, many challenges continuously presented themselves after losing her mother. One of the biggest issues for Vicky was losing the parent she had admired and related to the most. Her father was always more involved with his architect business and artistic hobbies that he worked on his downtime. She always loved him, but didn't quite have a closeness with him like her sister did. Beyond losing her mother and gaining a new stepmother, being sent off to boarding school separate from her sister was very devastating. She might have been able to process the loss of her mother and father much more appropriately had she not been stripped of all those closest to her. She couldn't even lean on her grandmother, whom she was very close to at this point, because that relationship had also been stripped. This young teen had every piece of familial connection removed from her life, leaving her desolate and all alone, with no role model to cling on to and help direct her in a positive manner. Accomplishments were limited for Vicky at this point in her life. She managed to begin recreating herself in the identity she once began developing in the beginning, but it wasn't easy. She had to learn to make friends in this very lonely stage in her life, but the friendships she did secure were some of the most important and instrumental she had ever known outside of family. Her biggest accomplishment she felt so grateful for was the disconnection she was given from her father and her stepmom. Because she was sent away, she no longer had to sit idly by and watch as her entire family memory was destroyed. She was invited back home once a year for Christmas, but after the first trip back, she never returned for holiday again. It was too much to bear, as well as too difficult to witness her love-filled childhood crumble to dust. By nearly 18, Vicky was nearing high school graduation, and it was time to start planning for her next step. Her stepmom, who had held every ounce of control over Vicky's life, had decided she was going to tour Europe for a year before being sent off to college. As Vicky prepared for this adventure, it was ripped out from underneath her. The stepmom changed plans again and decided Vicky needed to come home to be near her father. When she got there, it was obvious it was just another control tactic implemented by her stepmom. Vicky at this point had had enough and jumped out her bedroom window. She ran to the nearest bus stop and rode it all the way back to San Francisco, where she was finally able to see her grandmother again. At this point, Vicky was now a free adult and decided to do exactly what she wanted without any connection to her father or his new wife. This was the break she had been waiting for. Diversity and differences aiding Vicky in resolving her adolescent age crisis stemmed from several things. For starters, Vicky's family came from money, which put them into a higher bracket on the social class spectrum. Because of this, financial stability was never a problem. This is why even though she was sent to a very expensive female boarding school, she was well taken care of. She was able to focus all her attention on her studies without worry of where her next meal was going to come from or what she was going to wear to school. Vicky was also raised in a very religious family, so she was a devoted Catholic all of her young life. Luckily, she was able to continue with her already instilled religious beliefs and pursue peace and enlightenment amidst her struggles and confusion. In fact, Vicky says that much of her sanity and inspiration came from her commitment to religion. Having her higher power to fall back on aided her through much of this identity struggle that she was experiencing and helped keep her grounded when she might have otherwise given up. Biopsychosocial factors in Vicky's experience with crisis resolution both aided her in her journey as well as made it more difficult at times. Facilitating factors consisted of finding new role models to learn and grow from watching, creating a new foundation of support with peers from school, and also pursuing and attaining a new identity, enveloping both academic and professional personas. Vicky had mentioned several times throughout this identity recreation process that things like depression, anxiety, and even alcoholism, which run very boldly through her family tree, oftentimes surface, making this process more challenging. Vicky felt that in most ways she had the choice to make the best of her situation, and she intended to do just that. She saw this as an opportunity to take the reins of her life and do what she wanted. She began making decisions that would best suit her needs and goals of finding herself on this path she was forced into. She cut ties with her father and stepmother because it was only adding more chaos to her life. This was a wise decision because it halted the amount of control the stepmother had Amidst making friends in the dorms, Vicky got involved in different clubs and organizations to better identify with others as well as work on her own interests. She found a passion for tutoring others and was able to make a job out of it part-time on the side. This really helped in the identity creation process for her because she had found something she truly loved doing. There are a few drawbacks to analyzing Vicky's experience through the lens of Erikson's psychosocial development theory. First off, this theory neglects to take into consideration all the vast differences amongst people associated with their unique ethnic and diverse cultural differences. For example, identity development is going to be much different for a poverty-stricken Hispanic male living in Mexico than that of an upper-class Caucasian American female. This study seems to leave little room for the ability to accurately predict outcomes when social differences and expectations are hugely circumstantial. This leaves very little room for adequate data analysis and comparison testing on the basis of non-concrete criteria like integrity or inferiority, as mentioned in Rogers' text. My biggest reservation for relying on Erikson's theory for identity development is the fact that Erikson believed that each stage was specific to an age criteria with a little bit of wiggle room, and that one stage could not be fully achieved until the one before it was mostly completed. In my opinion, I believe that this process of identity development is an ongoing transition which can and does completely shift and rotate according to one's environment and situation. As written in Knight's article, A Proposed Model of Psychodynamic Psychotherapy, linked to Erik Erikson's 8 Stages of Psychosocial Development, Knight responds, Erikson's stages need to be viewed as interrelated and interconnected and overlapping, and not as stagnant and distinct entities with clear-cut boundaries. Her thought on this process of development takes into account other factors, mainly the tendency to seek out and utilize therapy as a means for developing or recreating one's identity under the realm of working with a professional and finding success and resolution. Knight feels that this can be a rotational process in creating or adapting one's identity through the process of therapy. For example, someone who identified as a victim because something in their past, with the proper guidance and assistance, can recreate a more positive and strengthened identity through the process of therapeutic searching and healing. I think I would have I think I would have chosen Yuri Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory for better perspective on Vicky's identity struggle. The reason for this is because Bronfenbrenner views the achievement of human development and identity as a process that involves the individual and their environment in a constant interloping interaction. Bronfenbrenner believes that development is situational and can be viewed through either negative or positive perspectives depending on the mindset the individual has set forth for themselves through their experiences. Bronfenbrenner breaks down the individual's environment into 4 systems, which are microsystem, mesosystem, exosystem, and macrosystem. The microsystem is comprised of all existing and active relationships to the individual within their immediate environment. In Vicky's case, this would include things like family, home, school, peers, church, etc. The mesosystem includes all the interrelational microsystems such as home and school, or church and home, or even, say, school and church. The exosystem would be made up of all social settings that can affect the individual either directly or indirectly. This might include such things as father's job affecting the family's financial status, or stepmother's decision-making process on the children's lives and locations. Although Vicky would have very little to no input or involvement on these levels, they still would be affecting her in some fashion. The last system in this theory would be macrosystem. This is the level in which things such as societal and cultural factors play a part in the individual's life experience. For Vicky, this can include things like federal laws that specifically dictate age limits and criteria for adulthood. The reasons this could be instrumental in the developmental process is because it inhibits her from having full control over her life until she reaches the age of 18. As you can see, after better understanding Vicky's identity development stage, that it might be more effective to look at it through the theoretical lens of ecological theory than it would be to make evaluations and interpretations through the eyes of Erikson's age-restricted developmental stage. Although identity formulation is hugely significant between the adolescent and young adult age, it is not strictly limited to it. In other words, in Vicky's eyes, her identity development and role confusion was an ongoing process, and to this day she is still working on it as it changes. Her identity as an individual is very much fluid and still an ongoing process directly correlated to her environment and current situation. She at one time felt isolated and abandoned, which did directly influence the identity she maintained, but just as the seasons, this grew and changed. and these are the resources I used in obtaining my information.